why do people get into trouble? Because here's what happens. And they take that 10,000 a month spend and they spread it. They spray and pray across 5 different channels at the same time. When you do that, you cannot get clear signal if you don't have sophisticated analytics. So in our case, we don't need any sophistication. We're doing one at a time. We're proving out that Exify sponsorship works for us. And so now that's baked into our strategy. And the next investment would be, coming in the second half of this year, where we're starting to invest much more in events and dinners. And we're going to look at, are we able to increase our, traffic or leads or whatever our metric is by, another 50%. We're taking big swings. We're not trying to go for like 1% lift, 2% lift. We're taking, hey, how do we double, triple our traffic? Because guess what? We're a startup, right? We can't live with 1 or 2% increases. That doesn't work. When you're on the VC train, you just have to go for big swings.
Hello, everybody. Everybody's here. So, all right, can you send us some Ben and Jerry's then? Hi, everybody. So I was a minute late because we're getting all this new studio gear for my house here, for my podcast studio, and I had to run up and get signed for the packages and everything. My favorite Ben and Jerry's flavor, there really isn't one. Like all of them. Fish food. I like the mint cookies and cream is amazing. So, and Danielle's high school job was scooping ice cream. I love that. All right. So, hey, welcome. This is a Exit 5 live session. Once a month or so, we do these to bring in an expert in B2B marketing to come in and go deep on a specific topic. Our guest today, who I'm going to bring up in a minute, is Pranav. He's the founder and CEO of Paramark. And he has an awesome point of view on how to think through marketing strategy, how to measure things, which is a big part of doing this job, and pitch us on a really cool topic for today, which is digging into some actual paid campaigns. And we're going to dive into what worked and what didn't with facts only, no opinions. But before we get into that, just let's go in the chat real quick. A bunch of people are already doing it, like right in coming from Dave from Vermont. And then also with where you're coming from, like, I want to know, why did you take an hour out of your day to come to this thing live? You certainly could have just gotten the recording, but what is it that made you want to come here live today? Danielle said she'd get fired if she wasn't here. Not initially, but I mean, like, if it became a thing, absolutely. Carrie's in Raleigh, Jen from London, Carl's in Newton, Mass. Shout out to Newton, Mass. Beautiful Victoria, Vancouver Island. Look, man, we got some sun out here in Vermont today. We're doing great. We got a fig tree. I got a salt lamp. It's all good. So, all right, we're here. We're going to go for an hour. You'll get the slides. You'll get all that at the end. We got Q&A and everything. Yeah, why don't you bring in the great Pranav? Big day for the crew over at Paramark. Funding announcement dropped today. I have a funny story for you. So, when I was first time head of marketing, I was working at a company called Drift, and we raised like $60 million Series B or something, which today is like today is pennies.
No,
and,
no,
it's changing. Sorry. That was a bad joke. I think what happened is, like, I think the 2021 funding environment like rechanged everything, and now we're back to, like, I think. Was this your seed? Would you announce your seed?
This was our seed. Yeah.
$6 million seed. That seems more right than like where we were, 2 or 3 years ago.
I mean, you ask any of the real OGs, right? They will say, no, this is an A, right? So there's definitely some inflation in our round names and round sizes for sure.
Okay. So anyway, so I'm at Drift, and we had this big funding announcement, and it was obviously the most traffic, the most inbound, the most ever thing to the site. And then, for 3 years after that, basically that thing became the bane of my existence, because it was the anomaly in all of the charts. Like every board meeting, every presentation, we'd always wait. Can you go back for a sec? What was that spike? That spike, September 2017. What was that spike? And I would have to be like, it's when we raised $6. And look. I said to them, I was like, look, if you guys want to raise $60 million every quarter, like, I'm happy to get you that.
The ROI is perfect, Dave.
The ROI is perfect. Yeah. So anyway, and then this is just a riffing on here on a side note. And then I just had a crazy conversation with my UPS driver, and I need to know if this is true. So he was saying that UPS is the best and safest. They have the best hiring process. He said they don't hire felons. He said FedEx and Amazon, they hire felons and they drive around and deliver packages. And then he said Amazon drivers, he said Amazon's driving around and it's legitimately spyware. They have cameras and everything in all of their cars. And so they're delivering your packages, but filming your house so they know what ads to serve up to you.
Oh,
Is that insane?
I was wondering where the story was going, and I was like, okay, this is a weird tangent, but I mean, that's believable to me, right? Like, why wouldn't you collect that data? I guess you're not breaking any rules. I actually don't know if you're breaking any rules.
Yeah. Well, and so anyway, there's my ad story for the day. So, all right, I'm gonna kick it over to you. Know your audience, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Let's see if we can get you to focus on marketing for about an hour. I know it's a lot. It's very hard to not check your email. My dopamine would be depleted right now if I were you. But so we're going to talk about you guys have pulled a bunch of campaigns from Paramark customers, which is cool. And we're going to dive into like some truth here, which one of the hardest parts about marketing is, you see people write these articles about breaking down the strategy behind X brand. And like, you actually don't really know how the ad ever actually performed. Did it do well or not? So we get to criticize these things on social media, but we don't actually know. And I think this is an awesome idea for the session. So I'm going to let you drive and I'll be here. I'll bring in the chat. We'll take questions at the end and let's go.
Awesome. So, well, first, hey, everyone, I'm Pranav. Dave, thanks for having us. This is exciting. We get to talk about all the learnings that we are sort of receiving in the last, whatever number of months with all of our customers. But I want to start with something, just kind of a disclaimer, right? We are very sensitive around customer privacy. And so I'm not going to share any names. I'm not going to give you like, hey, this is the customer, this is their ad, this is what they did. But I'm going to talk about generally sort of what's happening, and you'll see some statistics and how sort of, they measured it. So just kind of a very clear disclaimer there. If you have questions that you want to go specific into certain strategies, you can always reach out to me. I'm happy to have a one-on-one conversation around specific things, or even put you in touch with those customers who ran those tests in case that's helpful. But just want to kind of say that. Now, do you want to put up the slide deck and we can kind of start to, yeah, there we go. All right. So beautiful imagery here. Good job, Exit 5 team. I just copy pasted that. Okay. I am going to start with, we always have this debate. We use the word attribution all the time. And I went to dictionary.com this morning when I was creating the slides for this and just took a screenshot of what does it mean when people say attributed? And there's actually two different definitions. And I think this is an issue for a lot of people. One of the definitions is the attribute itself, right? The quality or a characteristic of a thing, a person, what have you. That's second on the list. The first definition is this idea of causality. Is something, a cause of something else? And so when people use the word attribution, when people use, attribution measurement, are you trying to answer the first question, or are you trying to answer the second question? Are you just looking for some type of a relationship, or are you looking for causality? If you're looking for causality, well, guess what? There's no better way than experimentation. I just went into ChatGPT and I asked the question this morning, what's the best way to find causality in marketing? Guess what it says? Randomized controlled trials, A/B testing. This is not new. This is the basis of the entire modern society, right? All of science is basically through experimentation. If you don't do experiments, there is no science. And so I start with this topic because if you are really serious about attribution and measurement, and you're not thinking about cause and effect relationships, if you're not thinking about experimentation, what are we even doing here? So I'm going to get off of my pedestal here and talk about some examples, but I did want to start with this, right? It's like, you don't have to be perfect, but like know what you are doing. And the other thing that really annoys me, we all say in marketing sometimes, let's test it. Let's put it out there. Let's test it. Guess what? If you don't have a control, there is no test. You're just throwing spaghetti at the wall and calling it a test.
It's like 90% of the things that I say, test it, try it. Just try
Sorry,
it.
Dave. Sorry, dude. And it's okay, right? Like, I'm not against just doing it. So my problem isn't with the fact that we all want to do things, because yes, you can just do things. There's nothing wrong with it. I do things all the time on social media and emails. Like, we don't have to test everything, but the words have meanings, right? And if we say that we are running an experiment or running a test, that means something. And I'm just asking for like all of us to level up our sort of seriousness when we use the words test and experimentation. That doesn't mean you have to experiment everything. You don't.
I think it's a good foundation, because I think it is like, Victoria in the chat said, when people run an A/B test and change the headline, body, and subject all at once, it's like part of the ability to measure what's working in marketing is the ability to like take a step back and slow down and pick one thing to go and test, so we can learn. There could be multiple factors. Can you school me really quick though on like, I wonder if a lot of things that I say often are like correlation versus causation. We could ask ChatGPT if you don't have a pithy line on this, but just like, could you explain the difference between those two?
Yeah, it's a good question. So correlation is essentially saying, are these two trend lines moving together? So my impressions on LinkedIn go up, my demos go up. When you map both of those charts together, they seem to move in tandem. That's correlation. Causation is saying that because I move my LinkedIn impressions up, my demos go up. That because is very important, because it's very possible it's not really cause and effect. It just happens to be the case that you're doing all these things. People are going to your LinkedIn and people are going to your website and booking a demo. Oh, guess what? You launched a podcast ad that you're not counting in this correlation. And that's the real reason why people are going and checking you out on LinkedIn or going to your website. So that cause and effect relationship is what you're truly after if you want to go from correlation to causation.
Nice. That was a perfect example, because it is a trap that we fall into when we see the correlation between those things. Awesome.
Okay. Now, one other thing before I go into examples, and I do want to get there as fast as possible. ChatGPT, these terms, right? So conversion lift. If you haven't heard that, oh my God, that is a problem. Meta offers this as a native experimentation tool. LinkedIn is launching it. It's in beta right now. You can call your LinkedIn reps and launch a conversion lift A/B test today if you wanted to, but it's going to be GA in like 3 or 4 months. So go check out conversion lift. Again, go to ChatGPT and just type geotesting. How does it work? Time testing. How does it work? Holdouts. How do they work? These are just like keywords that I'm dropping to you, but you can just, self-educate yourself. I don't have to spend, a ton of time giving you sort of basic education now that we all have an amazing AI assistant at our fingertips all the time. Okay. Here's the basic.
That was crazy to me. Like, I know this is so obvious, but just to hear you say ChatGPT, it talks about the world that we're in, which even a year ago, saying that would have been like, whoa, this guy's suggesting this cutting edge thing to find this information. This is the world we're in now. Yeah, I love it. All right.
We were having this conversation. My co-founder and I were figuring out if we can sponsor somebody's visa for an interview process. This is like live from last night. And I'm like, he sent me a question. It's like, do you think this is possible? I copy it, paste in the ChatGPT. ChatGPT is, yes, it's possible. Here are the 3 sources. Send it back to my co-founder. We're like, all right, great. So if you have questions about incrementality, measurement, ChatGPT is your best friend, really. Okay. So I'm going to talk about a bunch of incrementality tests, geo tests, holdout tests. These are all names for the same thing. And these are real examples from real customers over the last, whatever number of months that we've been doing these. How do they work? Very high level. We pick a few geographies where we test a specific channel or campaign. And that means that that particular campaign only ran in those geos. And then we look at how the aggregate metric in those geos performed compared to the geos where there was no ad campaign. And then we look at, was there lift? Was there no lift? What was the cost of any incremental lift that we saw? Okay, first example. I want to start with the easy one. This is like taking, candy from a kid. Branded search. If you haven't run this test for your business, what are we doing? Like, go hop off this webinar right now and run that test. 2 examples. There's a Series C company, SaaS company. There's a Series E company, SaaS company. So these are well-funded, venture-backed businesses. They're spending millions of dollars on marketing. They're spending hundreds and thousands of dollars on branded search ads, both on Google and on Bing. So what did we do? We said, hey, we're going to take a few geographies, and we use our platform to determine what those geographies are, where we are going to cut your branded search spend down to 0. So, California, Texas, Massachusetts, whatever the algorithm and the machine learning tells us, like, here are the states, here's how long you need to do it. Usually that's like 4 to 6 weeks. And you don't have to cut your spend down to 0. But in this case, we were like, let's just cut it down to 0 because we had some other data that, pushed us in that direction. Now, I want to see maybe in the chat, how many people think that there was no impact or there was, a ton of impact on the business? Like, just put it in the chat. I don't think I can see the chat.
I can. Oh yeah. Click on the right. Oh, maybe not. I'll.
Oh, I can see it. No, I see it. I see it.
Need some music? Do we need some music? Some theme music? Kelvin says no impact. Megan, minimal impact. Lauren,
All right.
low impact. No impact. No impact.
Yeah. All the people who are saying no impact, spot on. And I'm not talking about tens of thousands of dollars here, you guys. Like, the collected savings here are in the millions on an analyzed basis. Millions. So let that sink in, right? Like, and I'm not suggesting that, branded search is horrible, you should never do branded search. All I'm showing is real examples of 2 customers where branded search really did not impact their business. And if you haven't tested this in this fashion, we're talking about the metrics here, Luke, are MQLs, these are pipe, these are hand raisers, demos, these are like real business metrics. And we're saying that there's all of that stuff got shifted to organic. This is literally, the customer said it even before we shared the results with them. Like, hey, we looked at our own internal metrics, everything shifted to organic. I'm wondering what Paramark's results are going to show. I was like, yep, didn't do anything, right? So this happens.
Megan says, so does this mean they were still seeing the same click rate and impressions in that geo without paying for branded search?
Correct. It all just shifted from the branded search, the sponsored ad, to your organic SEO.
So literally the end user, the consumer behavior there is look for the term, skip over what would have been in the ad anyway, find the organic listing and click that.
Exactly. And here's the thing that happens, right? You talk to these customers, even when you see these results, it's still scary, because what happens is these brands are thinking, well, what if my competitor starts bidding on my terms and start taking attention from us? Well, guess what? In those states where we turned it off, right, we're now running a test for a longer period of time to see exactly that. What is the competitive, observation there? But even if there are competitors who are bidding on your terms, think of it this way. The person who is putting it into search and saying, I'm looking for Paramark, and then just because of a competitor ad, they're like, oh no, I'm not going to do a demo with Paramark, I'm going to go to their competitor. That's a little bit odd. Like, our customers generally are quite savvy. They're talking to 2 or 3 people. They understand all the competitors in the ecosystem. So just the presence of a competitive ad is not the thing that's going to swing the deal 100% towards your competitor.
There's a bunch of, this is clearly, it's so funny because everyone in chat was like, obviously, there was no impact, but then there's a billion questions on this. So let's just run, and this is like, I don't want to take up all the time on this one topic, but this is such a hot topic, like this branded search or not thing. So maybe let's just see if you have opinions and answers to some of these. Judy said, were these customers in competitive spaces? And were these customers in a competitive space?
Yeah, they're all competitive.
Jeanette says, are these well-known brands?
Yes.
Are these well-known brands though?
Yes, very well-known brands.
So does that have it? Do you think they're asking because that has some impact on the results here?
Well, does it not? Like, look at the numbers, right? Like, my point is, the answer is going to be different for each brand. So don't take that at face value and say branded search is dead. That's not what I'm saying. All I'm saying is, like, if you don't test it, how will you know? And guess what? These same customers had high impact, high efficiency channels where they were spending a pittance. And so taking this budget from branded search where there's no incrementality and switching it to channels where there is incrementality and doing the opposite of this, which we'll talk about in a couple of examples, right? Where you can increase your spend on YouTube, on, it's going to sound crazy, PMAX, on Twitter, on out of home, on billboards. And those are showing positive lift. So we'll talk about those examples. But this is not an isolated conversation, right? You have to think about the whole mix of where are you allocating between different channels.
And then there's 3 comments in a row. Was their SEO already strong? I feel like you need to know you need to be strong for that to happen. This is dependent on good SEO. This assumes an organic strategy and the site is optimized rather than playing for traffic. Any reaction?
100%. Yep. SEO is good for both of them, and they invest in SEO, and you can measure SEO in their models to see that, obviously SEO is doing very well. So if you haven't done any SEO, then yes, this could be for sure.
Cool. Thank you. All right.
All right. Now, this one is really interesting. This is billboards. Fun little backstory. The CMO is like, hey, we're heavily reliant on Google search. Most of it is like non-branded search, but it's like we're heavily reliant on Google search. And they inherited a new team and a new business. This CMO is like, yeah, our leadership does not buy into all of these brand things that we do because they've been burnt by it before. We did all these things 3 years ago, the previous leader did it, but it showed no impact. And so we just had to move on from that. What's really happening here is that there was no good measurement in place. So when that previous leader did all of that brand stuff, it just didn't show up because it didn't generate any clicks. So we set up a geo test where they bought a bunch of billboards, but in a very specific part of their target market. And guess what? I'm showing you the raw data, right? So you're looking at, and it's anonymized, so hopefully you can't see who it is, but you look at the conversion metric and you look at this observed value, which is essentially their success metric, how that performed over the course of when the test was running. And the control is basically saying what would have happened if you did not run this billboard campaign. Now you have clear causal evidence of the lift generated through billboard. And guess what? None of this would show up in any type of click attribution tool, and not even their post-purchase survey tool, right? Because that's just, people don't put it in. People are lazy. So this is an example, and this is a company that's saturated their Google search. They have nowhere more to go in Google search. They're looking for additional growth vectors. And this is a prime example of how you can do an A/B test in the real world with billboards. And guess what? These were not just the old school billboards. This was digital out of home. If you haven't heard of what digital out of home is, you really do need to go learn. There are a bunch of companies that do this, AdQuick, OneScreen, there's a bunch of others that'll let you buy digital real estate, right? These are digital sort of, bus stands or even sort of digital sort of displays on buildings, what have you. So they actually went down that route, not just sort of the physical billboards.
A couple follow-ups on this. Which metric people want to know if this is this clicks as the measured metric here?
This is actually, so I can talk about, it's a fintech company and they do some type of a fintech product. And so you have to apply to get qualified for that product. And so we're talking about the applications that customers are going and filling all the way through. You can think of it as like credit cards or loans or right, those types of things. But this is B2B. So it's B2B fintech, and it's a high consideration process and purchase. Like we're not talking about, a sort of a transactional sort of thing that's happening.
Cool.
All right, bunch of questions. I want to take this one. Is this correlation versus causality? This is causality, right? Because we are literally saying that in the test locations, we ran billboards, and everywhere else in the control, we did not have billboards. And we're looking at the aggregate lift in your applications between your test and control. So that's why this is causality and not just a simple correlation. There are so many questions. They do have a large TAM. So this is like focused on sort of SMBs, long tail SMBs. So yes, that is something that is relevant here. For a business, I'll show you some examples of how Paramark does our own testing, which will be fun. So we'll talk about that. Okay, here's another one that might be a little bit more accessible. So we're now talking about YouTube advertising for a couple of different companies. One is, doing hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, and then there is a Series C company. I think this is the same Series C company that we talked about earlier. And the first one is very enterprise-ish, right? You have to use this company's product like as a developer. You have to integrate it into your product. There's a high consideration cycle, all that fun stuff. And so they look at MQLs as their measure of success. This might be spicy, but it's fine, because for them, MQLs is literally a hand raiser. This is somebody coming to their website, filling out a form to say, I want to get in touch with your team to, do X, Y, and Z. So two very different examples. And this is why I say that, any channel being dead or not is not a thing. In the first example, there was very clear lift for YouTube for that particular business. We're looking at the pre-test period, and then we're looking at the test period, and we're seeing a clear lift in their measure of success compared to the control. In the second case, it's identical. And again, in that second case, we're talking about a collective spend of close to $1 million a year in YouTube advertising, and zero impact, zero lift. Now, why is that the case? That particular brand had massive, for whatever reason, YouTube SEO. So they had organic YouTube content that was doing really, really well. And so their advertising was really not breaking through beyond sort of what was already happening on organic. For this other brand, they had no organic content. YouTube did really well from an advertising strategy. So, questions on this one?
Yeah, I have a question for you. There's a bunch of comments that kind of echoing the same thing. And I think we can help people maybe with just like how to think about what the first principle here. So people are saying like, how do you, okay, these are great, but these often require huge budgets to run. There's some folks that are on here that have smaller businesses, smaller budgets. Any fun ideas for what experiments? So I think no matter what, that's always going to be the question, is when you see someone spend money, you're going to say, okay, well, what's the version of that? And so I don't know if we have a particular example, but Pranav, let's help with just a first principles type of thinking. If I was a smaller brand and we wanted to maybe test into doing something like this, like how would you think about that?
Yeah, great. I love this. And I do see Savannah's question there, right? Many of the experiments you're talking about require huge budgets to run. What are medium-sized businesses going to do? Now,
also, wait, just to build on that though, like for me also as a first-time marketing leader back in the day, I think one of my wrong beliefs though was like, oh, we don't have the budget for this. This is scrappy. We're going to be scrappy. And I actually end up screwing up later because I never did enough testing into the bigger budget. And so like, I do think I was like, well, and I saw a comment earlier about like, well, yeah, we can't do the test. We're not spending 120 grand a month on this channel. We can't do the testing. Well, I went from no budget to a lot of budget, and I didn't have any middle steps. And so I think maybe we can talk about like how to test and learn so that you can feel good about going to spend more money.
I love that question. It's fantastic. I put a post out on LinkedIn a few days ago where I had this like hypothetical conversation with a hypothetical customer. And it happens sometimes in reality as well, where I'm like, okay, let's do a holdout where we cut. They're like, no, we can't risk that much. We can't cut spend. Like, what do we mean? Like, how can we not advertise to our audience? We need to be going after growth. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Let's increase spend in a specific geography. Oh, no, we can't go get additional budget. Like, that's not going to happen. I'm like, okay, so you don't want to cut spend. You don't want to increase spend. What are we doing here? Right? So first thing, if you want to get growth, if you want to run experiments, you have to take risk. There is no alternative. Zero alternative. If you wanted everything to be a done deal, A+, guaranteed, proven, before you even did anything, we would all be sipping pina coladas at the beach. Why are we here, right? Like, that's not how marketing works. That's not how reality works. Now, let's take a specific example for a small brand. When Paramark starts advertising, Guess what? We're not going to run a national campaign. We're going to build an account list. We know the 1,000 companies that we want to go after, and we're going to take our advertising and split that account list into half and say, for half of that account list, that's going to go into my LinkedIn audience, and the remaining half is not going to go into my LinkedIn audience. That's a very simple test. It's not done by geos, it's done by account lists. I could structure it differently. I would say, hey, we're based in California, we're based in SF, our entire team is here. We're only going to advertise in SF. Or let's flip it. We're only going to advertise in New York to see if we can lift our inbound demos from New York. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. We could run that test for $500. You could run that test for $1,000. You can run that test for $100,000. So this idea of you need big budgets to do this type of testing is plain wrong.
So Vanda said, to be fair, we're not talking about not being willing to take risks. We're talking about businesses who have 10K to spend on ads, which eliminates most of the meta experiments that you mentioned. Okay, maybe in that example, yes.
And yeah, 10K is a great example, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, I bet you there's a bunch of people on this webinar who'd be pumped to have 10K a month to spend.
That's right. And I would just not spread that out nationally. I would do it either by geography or some cut of your audience where you can see your end metrics move along with that audience. And, Savannah, happy to do some live experimentation, sort of brainstorm with you as well. Like I do this all the time with people who are also not customers. So we should do that. Okay, here's another one. CTV. So this is connected TV. This is a Series F SaaS company. They, again, we're reaching a point of saturation. They're like, hey, we want to try some connected TV ads and, see what that does. And same exact thing. The budget was fairly small. It was only about a $30,000 or $40,000 budget. And that means that the noise is higher, right? Because when you're spending lesser across a fewer set of geographies, you're not going to get perfect precision. But in this case, we did see very clear lift. And so for them, this is the first time that they're going into sort of more of a video, audio type of format. Most of their prior work had been very direct response, bottom of funnel, but they're reaching a saturation point. They're seeing a little bit of a decline in their business. They're trying to find new avenues of growth. So, paid social, paid search, those are not your only avenues. Podcasts, CTV, direct mail, we've seen brands get success with those types of channels, and your budgets don't always have to be in the millions. Even with a $20,000, $30,000 budget, you can run experiments. Okay, here's a campaign that didn't work. So this is a Sequoia-backed company. They launched a multi-channel test across YouTube, across out-of-home, so Billboard, CTV, Meta, all at the same time, concentrated on a specific set of geographies. And here's why it didn't work. We saw clear lift. Don't get me wrong. It worked, but it was very expensive. The cost per incremental conversion that they were tracking was almost 10x what it was the case for the rest of their media investments. And so, yes, you have lift, but it's not efficient. And so what do? Now we're going back and testing individual components within their media plan rather than, bunching it all up together and doing smaller tests. And this goes back to that point of like, you don't have to run a massive test. You can run smaller tests to get signal before you, ramp up into that bigger budget that you have. Okay, I'm going to skip PMax because I wanted to. PMax is Performance Max. I think somebody asked that question. This is an ad format on both Google and on Bing now. So you should look into it. Many people sort of swear off of PMax and say it's all, trash inventory and it doesn't work and all that fun stuff. But in this particular case, we did see a very clear signal that it worked and it's become part of the strategy for that specific brand. All right, I'm going to switch because I think I'm sensing people are like, hey, you're telling us about these big ideas, these big brand campaigns. We don't have the budget for that. We're trying to just, execute with 10K, 50K. I'll give you our example. Paramark. We are a 10-person company. We just announced our seed fundraise, which has been long overdue, but we make some real money. We generate revenue. We have real customers, as you can tell, and we have a little bit of investment in marketing. So what did we do? We actually, for the first time, did a pretty big sponsorship, and that was with Exit 5. So this is very meta conversation here. And I'm showing you our real stats. How do I run this experiment? Very, very simple. Our consideration cycle is anywhere between 3 months to 12 months, which means somebody becomes aware of us, somebody does a demo with us. It might take 3 months to close that customer into closed one, or it might take 12 months to close that customer into closed one. We don't know when we are engaging with them. So when we think about success, I look at the aggregate traffic to our website. This is going to sound blasphemous to half the audience, or maybe 90% of the audience here. Now, I'm fortunate that I'm a marketer and I'm also the CEO, so I get the skepticism that you might have around that idea. But for us, if we increase overall traffic and we're not doing it in a spammy way, that's a good, success outcome for us. So you can see this red line. That's basically our traffic from July of last year to December of last year. It's pretty standard, pretty basic, like it was just running. And most of that was because of all of my LinkedIn activity. That is the first channel that I broke into. That's what I did every day, showed up on LinkedIn, added, context. And we were not doing any other advertising. We weren't doing any events. We weren't doing anything other than LinkedIn. One channel, because we knew that it worked. We were like, all right, we're ready to make some investments into marketing. The first investment that we decided to make was into Exit 5. So we're going to sponsor Exit 5. We're going to do this, bunch of things together. And guess what happened? Our traffic literally doubled the moment we started working with Exit 5. I don't need any UTM codes. I don't need any click IDs. There's nothing else that we did. So it was a very controlled test. The only experiment that we ran at that point of time was Exit 5 sponsorship. And you can see the direct impact. We didn't have to do any holdouts, right? That's not always necessary. But this is a very simple pre-post type of an experiment. And you can see that it's staying elevated because of the way that we ran this campaign. Now, you can go a little bit more detail. I'm showing you month-by-month numbers. Now I'm going to show you the week-by-week numbers. This is directly, all of these spikes are perfectly timed with every single campaign that Exit 5 ran for us. Perfectly. So
it's a perfect example of like earlier, also like in like throw out Exit 5. Like you could do this with anything. Like when I was the CMO at Privy, we wanted to test podcast ads, and we basically found 10 smaller micro, niche influencers that were running podcasts, and we ran the campaign over a set of 3 months. Like, wish I was a little bit smarter. And this is actually a simpler way to look at it. And just let's map those two things together, and let's look at the spikes in awareness and interest in people hitting our site since we started running those podcast ads. This is cool.
Yeah, that's precisely it. So when you think about how you're going to, now, why do people get into trouble? Because here's what happens. And, they take that 10,000 a month spend and they spread it. They spray and pray across 5 different channels at the same time. When you do that, you cannot get clear signal if you don't have sophisticated analytics. Right? So in our case, we don't need any sophistication. We're doing one at a time. We're proving out that Exit 5 sponsorship works for us. And so now that's baked into our strategy. And the next investment would be, coming in the second half of this year, where we're starting to invest much more in events and dinners. And we're going to look at, are we able to increase our, traffic or leads or whatever our metric is by, another 50%. We're taking big swings. We're not trying to go for like 1% lift, 2% lift. We're taking, hey, how do we double, triple our traffic? Because guess what? We're a startup, right? We can't live with 1 or 2% increases. That doesn't work. When you're on the VC train, you just have to go for big swings.
Hey,
so yeah.
On the point that you mentioned earlier, like when you started writing on LinkedIn, was there a time frame? Like, did you look at did you know instantly? Because like obviously, I love this topic of founder brand and having the founder right on LinkedIn, and this is exactly how I'd want people to look at it. But I feel like oftentimes what happens is people give up too early. And so they were like, yeah, I was writing on LinkedIn. I wrote 2 posts a week for like a month and, we didn't see anything from it. Or what they do is they only post with like UTM links and, sign up for this webinar and do this thing. From my observation, it's like, I saw you kind of commit to, all right, I got this company, Paramark. I have a strong point of view on the market. I'm going to commit to posting to LinkedIn with my strong point of view a couple times a week for like 6 months. And I'm not going to look at the short-term results. And then now a year later, you're able to look at it and see those spikes. Like, did you know that going in? I think just like with some of these channels, like these more brand channels, that you can't go in there thinking of it from a direct sales standpoint. But when you give it time and then you get a year out, you look at it like we see, the number one driver for us of Exit 5 memberships, as an example, beyond LinkedIn is our podcast. There's no there's no there's no links on the podcast. It's just people over time listen to the podcast, hear about the community, and eventually join.
Totally. I'll give you a counter to that, Dave. I'll answer your question directly, but like, look at this example. This is billboards, and it's having short-term impact on the outcome metric, not long-term, short-term. So this idea that brand campaigns only work in the long term is completely flawed. That's bullshit. So, if it doesn't work in the short term, highly unlikely it's going to work in the long term. Highly unlikely. Right? It's like saying that somehow you're just going to sit with that idea and it's going to give you some crazy inspiration 12 months from now.
So it's either going to work right away or it's never going to work.
Very unlikely that it will work down the line. Right? So now, exactly. Now, let me answer that specific question to you, right? Which is, why did I do LinkedIn the way that I did? I don't know why I thought LinkedIn was a good idea. So, I don't have the benefit of like going back in time and thinking exactly about it. But I started, and for me, the results were actually quite immediate. What that means is our ICP was engaging with my content right off the bat. That was like one engagement. I was like, another marketing leader liked my post. That's good. I just, got a warm way to connect with that individual. I would go connect with that individual. And so it was kind of immediate, even if that was not sort of I'm getting closed won revenue out of it. But the feedback, the engagement, the activity, the leading metrics were all very positive right off the bat. And so never stopped doing it. I'm like, great. Like, let's just keep growing this thing. And by now it's reached a point where people literally take my LinkedIn posts and email me and say, hey, love this post. Can we have a demo? Right? It's like, I don't need to prove the efficacy of LinkedIn anymore to myself because like we know it works. Like, so I don't know if that.
I think it totally helps. I actually think about this a lot. When we were at Drift, we had a podcast, and the podcast ended up being if you talk to the sales team, our podcast, which was not about the product that we were selling at all, became the number one driver of pipeline, like until we made basically our first 5 million ARR. And we used to joke, how are we going to measure the podcast? How are we going to measure the podcast? Well, it turns out on all the sales calls, they had basically first found out about us. They started listening to our podcast and became fans of the podcast. And eventually over time, they went to our website. They were deciding to shop Drift versus Intercom versus this other thing, and they went with us. But if we had Gong at the time, like we could analyze that. I also find myself quoting something you said to me early on at some point in an interview or something. You're like, we need to stop treating our customers like they're morons as part of this attribution puzzle. It's like, if I see Pranav online and he says something interesting, I don't need to click on this perfectly tracked link and get credit for that. It's like, oh no, what was that guy's name again? Oh yeah, Pranav. What was the company? I go to LinkedIn. It's Paramark. Boom. Then I go to the Paramark website. It's like, we need to give more people, we need to give our customers more credit in that. Like, if you do something that is memorable, people will find you. And let's focus more on the part of getting people to be memorable, right?
100%. Repetition is key. And there was an interesting point in the chat about, what about if your content isn't working? Yeah, absolutely. When we are talking about tests that didn't work, right? So let's, this YouTube example that didn't work, right? This particular customer, it's a great brand. It's like, and they do something that's very relevant for YouTube, but YouTube ads didn't work for them. All it means is that the specific creative offer execution didn't work. Doesn't mean that it will never work. It just means that whatever they were doing at that particular time was not working. And so they have to change something about their creative, about the offer, about the execution of that creative. And that's, absolutely sort of critical for any marketing team. Don't give up on a channel just because your first test fails. Okay, this is a fun one. B2C example, but I think it's relevant. They worked with us for about 7 months. They did about 7 tests, all failed. Not incremental, no lift, not incremental, no lift. The 8th test worked. So it's very easy to give up when you do experimentation. It's very easy to say, shit, like none of this stuff is working. But it takes a long-term commitment to growth because not everything is going to work. And think about it from a sales perspective. You have to hear 7 no's to get 3 yeses. I've lived that life for the last 2 years. That's the same exact concept in marketing. 7 campaigns are not going to work, but the 3 that work are going to make your business amazing. All right. I got super excited there, Dave.
That's great, man. This is great. This is what I want these sessions to be. This is perfect. So do you have more stuff, or do you want to take Q&A?
Let's do Q&A. Like, happy to take Q&A.
Oh, wait, there was one comment about somebody did want the PMax example. If you want to,
let's talk about it. Yeah, Performance Max.
Let's do Q&A.
So this is a pretty big company. They have, lots of different channels, classic, right? Heavy reliance on paid search, and they're running out of sort of, real ways to kind of grow that part of their allocation. And Performance Max is this new thing that Google launched. And I do think that this is the future, by the way. So any media buyers who are in the chat, every ad platform is moving towards an algorithmic buying process, which means you just tell us your brand, tell us your copy and messaging, and give us your website. We're automatically going to generate a whole bunch of ads. That's like the generative AI part of like ad creation. And then we're also going to use our own machine learning and AI to figure out who to serve those ads to. So you don't have to worry too much about giving us too much detail. We'll just figure it out for you. Performance Max is kind of like that, where they're looking at all the Google properties, whether it's the Discover feed on Google, it's YouTube, it's search, it's shopping, it's wherever else they have access to. And, it gets a lot of hate because people say Performance Max is like bad inventory. Google is just trying to, increase their monetization by giving you bad inventory and just like putting ads there. So we ran this test. It's the target metric is MQLs, which are basically hand raisers for this brand. And we only ran it in about 10 states in the US. And so Performance Max was limited to those 10 states. And we observed what the conversions, the MQLs were from those 10 states. This is an important point. I think some other people asked. So we're just like the blue line is just showing you MQLs from those 10 states where Performance Max ran. And the control is everything else. The other 40 states where Performance Max did not run. I'm simplifying the explanation a little bit, but I don't want to get too geeky here. And then you look at what is the lift or the lack thereof. And you look at the pre-test period to kind of inform yourself on what your test period is as well. And so in this case, it worked perfectly for them. Now, why did it work for them and it doesn't work for others? I think some people mentioned this here, that you have to be very careful about all the exclusions. So this is a media buying thing. You probably don't want to have your branded search placements in Performance Max, and you can do all of those exclusions. So you're only targeting surfaces and inventory that you're not cannibalizing on your non-brand search and brand search and other sort of Google properties by running it this way. So there might be people who are more well-versed than I am on Performance Max in the chat. So if I got anything wrong, please keep me honest. But from a testing perspective, from a measurement perspective, it was very positive for them. All right, there was a good question here. How do you know how long to run the test? You want me to take that one, Dave?
Do you think I was going to answer that one?
So the answer is actually all based on math. So when you do the experiment design, I didn't show you the process of how you do experimentation design, but you essentially get and this is where I plug Paramark. We essentially help you come up with the geographies, the time, and the budget that you have to either increase or decrease to get a statistically valid answer. You can think of that whole process as very similar to an A/B testing tool on your website. You have all those A/B testing calculators. You just put in some numbers and like hit enter and tells you this is how how much sample size you need. You're kind of doing that, but it's a lot more sophisticated because you're working with much more messy numbers when it comes to, actual sort of media in the real world. So it could be 4 weeks, could be 6 weeks. Typically, it's ranging between that time. If you have very noisy data, that means your data moves very up and down every day, then you need a longer period of time because you're trying to lift above that noise. So I'm getting a little bit data sciencey here.
I just said my answer is till you get bored, then you change it.
That works too.
Hardest part about turning off the branded search is the CFO. This is back in the day when I used to go to the office. The CFO comes over the desk and we're not showing up at Google right now. And I'm like, oh,
yes, yes, yes. Oh,
hey, can I actually? I just want. This has nothing to do with what we're talking about. We should answer people's questions, but could you actually share the summary of you hired a marketing leader for the first time recently, and you had this very thorough hiring process, and I thought that was interesting. As somebody who has in the past not done great at the hiring thing, Exit 5 team is awesome. I've hired some good people, but I think really treating it, you gave it a really important go at it, and I think it's a cool example. So if you just would riff on that for a session, that'd be cool.
Yeah, totally. No, it's a good one, and we should do an episode with Sam on my podcast because I think it's a good one. Daniel,
I think you gotta wait. I think you gotta wait for a year on that. I just think that's no disrespect to Sam. It's no disrespect. Like, just things happen, man. It's crazy. Everybody's in love. Everybody's in love with the new hire. Like, the first 3 months is the honeymoon phase, and like by month 4, you're like, well, it's not anything yet, and then it's just slippery slope. So
so this is a really fun one.
Sam has entered the chat. I'm paying attention now.
I love this. So Sam, well, first, if you don't know Sam, go check him out. He's awesome, and he's like a super connector. So I would say that if you want to learn marketing and also just like he's spent time at Microsoft, at Shutterfly, Sunbasket, he actually comes from more of a consumer background. So it was a little bit of a, Sam and I kind of figuring out how is this going to work. So I'm sharing sort of all the background here. And he did a power move in the process. Even before we started talking about the role, he just had me leads. And one of them converted.
That's amazing. That's so good.
Right? One of them converted, and I'm like, wait, what is going on here? And I'm like, frankly, I'm like, in an alternative universe, I would go work for Sam. And so that was my thought process. And like, hey, if we're going to bring in somebody at a seed stage, right, where, they're a leader, they're a VP, and they're sort of pushing us in a very sort of, big way, it's got to be someone that's baller, right? And so to steal Justin's language here. Now, the interview process itself was, with Sam specifically, it was like multiple weeks, multiple months. We riffed on a bunch of ideas, but more concretely, we actually gave him an exercise that was a take home that was like, hey, take this other Series B startup. So we didn't give him any cases on Paramark. We actually gave him a case on evaluate this other Series B startup because we wanted to be on neutral ground. This was an important thing for us. It's like if we gave him everything about Paramark, we would be biased. If we gave him everything about Sunbasket, he would be biased, right? He just there's information asymmetry there. Let's pick a neutral territory and have him do a whole sort of rundown of positioning, branding, messaging, campaign execution. And I think, if I'm not wrong, Sam spent like a couple of days with us in the office. Like he came, on site, and he just, workshopped that whole thing with us, with different people on the team, right? We've got engineers mostly other than me. And so I'm sure it was a little bit awkward. You should interview Sam about that for him, right? Trying to explain more marketing to engineers. But that was the whole process, and it worked out pretty well. And again, like Sam was just had power moves up his sleeves.
Did you pay him to come hang out with you?
Yes, we did. Well, Sam,
that's a sticking point. I see that come up in our community a lot. It's like, hey, I'm interviewing for this job, and I'm not that obviously I think you handle it great. There's just something that comes up a lot, which is like, hey, I'm interviewing for this role. They want me to make a presentation and basically they're going to steal my strategy and not compensate me for it. And it's a really slippery slope there.
Yeah, so for all of our on-sites, if we're doing anything beyond like a day-long on-site, right, which is pretty typical. So if we're doing a take-home or what have you, we essentially structure it as a paid project. And we agree on that up front, right? So we're not saying like, hey, you do any free work. That is expensive, but we do it. Like for engineers, like our engineers come on site for 3 days if they can carve out the time. If they can't carve out the time, like 1 day is fine, right? So like we customize it for each person.
Cool. All right. We'll export all these questions and we'll give them to you all. I know you all do. There's definitely a content thing where there's a bunch of questions that we didn't get to. We got a ton of really timely, relevant ones in the chat. So I'm not gonna do Q&A right now, but maybe you all can answer them in some content form or another. We'll give you the export of all this. Thanks, man. This was awesome. This was super fun for me. The chat was awesome, and I messaged something to Daniel during this session, and I just want to give a shout out to like the people who came to this. Like, man, there is so much information out there online. Like, to treat your job like a craft and to be like, yeah, I could get the recording, but to actually come and hang out and like ask questions and take notes and like, this is, you get what you put in. And I just really appreciate like marketers that are here trying to learn, trying to get better. Like it's very easy to just listen to podcasts and mess around on YouTube, or like putting in the time and effort to like come in and do something to help you and grow your career and your business. Like, heck yeah, those are our people. And I love that. I believe in self-development and personal development at work and outside of work. And so I love that. And Pranav, you're always great. So thank you for doing it. Go check out Paramark. They're doing a great job. Pranav's got to go back to his inbox because this is the best inbound lead day ever. Well, for now, because they announced their seed funding and he came out here and hung out for a little bit. So appreciate it.
A lot of fun. Great question.
Good to see you all. We'll see you later. I was supposed to ask you to rate this, but yeah, rate it real quick. Where's the poll? Where's my producer, Danielle? So we got a measurement. We're supposed to do this. Okay, no poll. All right, it was great. 10 out of 10. See ya. Goodbye, everybody. It was awesome. See y'all.